You're listening to A Slice of Therapy with me, Alun Parry. Now imagine you went to the supermarket for your big shop and you didn't take a shopping list. In fact, you hadn't even thought about what it is that you needed. You just went to the supermarket, and as you're going round, you're sort of putting things in the basket as you spot them and think, yeah, that might be good. And every now and again you'll remember something and think, yeah, I'm sure I need that. And then by the end of the shop you go and you pay for your stuff and you bring them home, and then you realise that you haven't got most of the things that you need. And you've probably got a couple of things that you don't need. But the shop was a bit of a disaster because you've been, and yet you still need loads and loads of essential items. Now this is the reason, isn't it, why people will set goals. And this is one of the reasons why it looks as though it's a useful thing in terms of setting goals, because in a sense it's like drawing up a shopping list, but for life rather than just the supermarket. And if you go into the supermarket without having the slightest idea what it is that you want, you probably won't get it. And it's similar for life as well, isn't it? If you were to go around with absolutely no idea of what it is that you actually want, then there's a good chance you won't get that either. And this is one of the reasons that in my practice, when I'm working with people, trying to describe in some detail what it is that the person wants is really important. Even if what they're coming in with is a problem, I'm always curious, if the problem wasn't there, how would you know the problem wasn't there? If you woke up tomorrow, for instance, and the problem was gone, how would you figure that out? What would life be looking like if that wonderful thing happened and you were to have a day without the problem tomorrow? And so getting clear on what we want is really valuable. The only downside with goals, though, is that we tend to have them very much in the future. Like, we have one day goals. One day I'd like to do this, or one day I'd like to be that, or one day I'd like to have the other. And the problem with goals which are one day goals is, well, a couple of things really. First of all, they're so far into the distance that we tend not to take any action on them. But secondly, because they're so far in the distance, we make them so kind of vague and even kind of outlandish sometimes, because we know that we're not actually going to take the action to get to them. They're really far away. I'd really like that, but I know I'm not going to do anything about it type of goal. And we see this every year, don't we, in New Year's resolutions? We kind of make a goal for that year. Some organisations even set targets for that year. By the end of the year, we'll have achieved this, and we'll have achieved that, and we'll have achieved the other. And yet when you set a goal even for a year ahead, a year's quite a long time, isn't it? If you think of having to get something done by a year today, it's quite a long time. And us humans, we tend to work better, at least some of the time, with some kind of tangible deadline. And so what we'll do in that situation, we'll probably wait until around about October or November and then scramble like mad to try and hit that target. Or we'll have just let the whole idea drop between now and that time. And so you can see that there's this kind of tug of war going on, because goals can be helpful in the sense of establishing what it is that you actually want, making yourself a shopping list for life, much as you would make a shopping list for a supermarket shop. And yet at the same time, the way we set goals is kind of problematic, because we kick them so far into the future that we never really have to do anything about them. And they can be anything at all, no matter how outlandish or vague. Now, in order to combat that, one of the things that I often do is I set short-term goals. And the benefit of short-term goals is it forces me to get to a point where I'm really clear about what I want. It's not just that I want something, but I get very, very clear in terms of what I'd be able to deliver by that time. And when I say short-term goals, what I'm thinking about here are things like about 12 weeks in advance. So making your year be just 3 months long and give yourself a target. Now, 12 weeks goes quite quickly. And yet you've got 12 weeks in order to actually achieve something meaningful, whatever that happens to be for you. Now, one of the difficult things, I suppose, in terms of coming up with this goals is trying to think of what your target might actually be. There's an old study, and you can try it yourself anytime. You know, if I were to give you 10 seconds and say, right, just name 10 things, your mind would probably go blank and you'd name fewer things than if I'd said, name 10 things that are in my fridge. There's a weird thing about getting specific that just gives your brain a bit of a jump start. And even though in the first example, I'm giving you the whole world to choose from, by telling you that it's 10 things in my fridge, you just get started straight away and you name many, many more things. It's an interesting thing, really. So in order to help you out in terms of thinking about the things that you might want, what I tend to do is work with 9 different categories. So I'll tell you what those 9 are, because then you can kind of scribble them down and then have a little think if there's anything in that area that you would like. And then you'll be able to look at what you can actually deliver within 12 weeks. Now, in some areas, you won't necessarily want to change anything or want to set a target there. So I'll leave this up to you, but these are the 9 that I kind of use. The first is career. Like, what is it you would like in your career, if anything? Friendship. Is there any improvement that you'd like in the area of friendship? How about finances? Maybe there's something that you'd like to change in that area where you get access to more income. Or perhaps it's health and fitness. Or your intimate relationship. So how it is between you and a close partner, for instance. Is there anything there that you'd like differently? Or how about where you live? Like your home environment. Not just in terms of what area that you live in, but what's it like to live in your place? I mentioned in a recent podcast that I was a bit grumpy because my living room was a bit untidy. So that'd be a good example of where I live. Then in terms of learning and growth, perhaps there's something that you want to learn, something you'd like to study or a new skill you'd like to pick up. And then what about fun and joy? Where's the fun and joy in life? And is there something that you'd like to do more of in that area? And then finally, creativity. Now, there might be something that I've missed out there because these are the 9 that I use for me, but it's just as a starting point. So if you know that there's something that's really been missed out that's important to you, you can add that category in as well. And it's just a short list, really. Career, friendship, finances, health and fitness, intimate relationships, where you live, learning and growth, fun and joy, and finally creativity. That just gives you a little guide to decide what is it that you actually want in life in that area. Because when you know that, you can then start to look at which things that you could actually deliver in 12 weeks. You see, it makes it real. Because you can't really overshoot too much. The key is not to make a rod for your own back. But let's say, for instance, as I do, I'd like to lose a little bit of weight. We've just had this COVID pandemic and I've put a few pounds on. So I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't mind losing a bit of weight. So under health and fitness, that might be a target for me. And so then I say to myself, well, what is a reasonable target that I really am pretty confident that I could deliver on in just 12 weeks? Now, obviously, I could really push myself, but the aim isn't to push myself. The aim is to kind of pretty much guarantee that I'm going to deliver this thing. Because after all, if I do deliver it, that'll be an improvement in life. And that's a good thing. We don't need to aim for perfection or some sort of superhuman effort. Just an improvement in life within that 12-week period. So I might look at that and say, well, I could probably do 6 or 7 pounds in a 12-week period and be pretty confident of actually pulling that off. And so you can see that what happens here is, rather than say, oh, I'd like to lose weight one day, or, oh, I'd really like to weigh 12 stone one day, throwing some sort of target out into the ether, what that means is that I never ever action it. Whereas when I look just 12 weeks in advance, I'm able to see something which is much more possible. And then it gives me something to work towards. Like I say, we're better with deadlines, aren't we, than just in the never, never. And so working towards that 12-week deadline gives me something soon to aim for, rather than some point in the far distance. And so there's a real power then to these short-term goals, because not only does it identify what you want, but it means that you get focused and you start taking action on delivering something that is capable of being delivered within a 12-week period. It forces us to ask the question, well, what is it that is possible for me to do in this area to improve life? And by asking that question, it gets us very, very specific. And so the things that we actually want in life, the shopping list that we were talking about at the start, actually becomes something that we can deliver on. And so there's a lot of power in this in terms of life change, which doesn't involve you having any kind of huge superhuman effort, but just involves you making some steps forward in that particular area. So let me just recap then. We looked, didn't we, at the importance of having a shopping list for life, just like a shopping list for the supermarket. And we looked at how often, even in the therapy room, I find it really important to try and flesh out what a person wants, because once we know what we want, we're more likely to get it. And yet the downside of goals is that we'll tend to kick them into the long grass and say, I'd like that one day. And we really mean that that'll happen on the 12th of never. And so we don't action it because we don't have a deadline, and it's too distant and too woolly for us really to be focused on it. But if we give ourselves a short-term goal, like say 12 weeks away, it means that what we do is that we start to really focus our attention on what can be delivered and how we can deliver it. And there's lots of different areas that you could look at, but I suggested, didn't I, 9 particular areas that you might want to look at to see if there's any goals or things that you want in life that could be delivered within the next 12 weeks. We looked at career, friendship, finances, health and fitness, intimate relationship, where you live, learning and growth, fun, enjoyment, and creativity. So my invite to you is to have a little think through those categories. Is there anything that you want in life? Is there anything that would improve life in that area? And once you've identified it, think what could be delivered within 12 weeks. Not that would require a superhuman effort, but that you're pretty confident that you could deliver in a 12-week period. You see, once you know what that is, you get a realistic target then. And once you've got a realistic target, it's easier to understand how you can actually get from this point to that point in that short amount of time. And so hopefully by doing this, in 12 weeks' time, you'll have noticed some really decent improvements in life. You'll have noticed that you've moved from here to a slightly better place. So if you like this idea, then please spread it around. If you want to work with me directly, Alun Parry, you can work with me one-to-one. You'll find out more at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. Although I work online, so it doesn't matter what your location is. And please subscribe to the podcast because it's free and it means you never miss an episode again. So thanks for listening. I'll be back again tomorrow with another one.